Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. This video I'm continuing my lecture series into National Security Affairs Intelligence. So this is the National Security Intelligence book, Oxford Handbook of National Security Intelligence. This is the book that I'm using. Make sure you get a copy of the book. It'll facilitate both the reading, obviously, and your understanding. It's a good thing to have a supplement text, just so that you can cross-check to see if my interpretation is something that you can understand or even agree with. So I always recommend that you get the book. It's essential, I think, in order to have a proper understanding. If you're just watching what I say and regurgitating what I say, well, you know, that doesn't help anybody at all, right? The idea is that these video series, all my video series, are supposed to be a supplement to existing knowledge, to existing text. It makes your understanding that much more complex. To have a resource that's not a friggin' Cliff Notes, to have a resource that will help you in you know, transforming the way in which you interpret your information, which is always a good thing. Next thing, notes. Make sure you click the link in the description field. It'll take you to the PDF. Download the PDF. We're progressing through this relatively I was thinking about it this morning just now, and I'm like, we're 7 hours in. We're 7 hours in and we're on page 10. If we keep this up, it's going to be 21 hours by the time we get to the 30 notes that I have, the 30 pages worth of notes that I have. And I need to augment those notes once I hit page 15, because I'll be halfway through. I'm going to do this series until the end of December. So whatever the final number is, I'm going to stop wherever I'm at. December 31st. I'm not going to take the series into January. It's already good. I mean, for it to be already 7 hours up is something that I'm proud of myself already. Because, you know, it's 7 hours of sort of theoretical, detailed discourse on intelligence. I still feel like the last lecture was pretty deep. I'm not going to front. The last lecture was relatively deep. The few before that were okay. It's going to get a little bit more complex as we get by. If we keep at this pace, who knows? I mean, we could. The goal was initially 25, but I think I'll be able to do maybe 30 to 40, which is crazy, thinking that my Nietzsche series is 50-something or maybe 60-something. So, I mean, this is going to be pretty damn substantial. But like I said, I got 1 month of my life that I'm dedicating to this book, into this lecture series. We'll see what I'll be able to pull off in a month, and that's all I'll be doing. So it's going to be interesting to see what it is. It's like a challenge for myself to see what I can do. And as you guys know, those of you and gals, when I do these series, it's not about just throwing numbers up, right? It's not about saying how many hours I've done. It's also a keen account of, and a keen acceptance of the responsibility of making sure that I give you good material, right? So I want it to be quality as well. All right, with that, let's begin. We're in the top of page 10. Remember, my section breaks for this lecture series are going to be a little bit different, for the fact that as long as we pick up where we left off, that's all that really matters. So if you have the notes, you should be able to follow along. We're on number 3 at the top of page 10. So you can't really sort of lose your place. That's where we are. So let's begin again. And this is section, we're still in section, what section are we in? Just to make sure. We're in section 2.0. Okay, so we're in section 2.0, and we're at the top of page 10, number 3. So we're in bullet point number 3, and we're continuing our previous discussion on risks between threats, right? Yeah, that's what we're continuing. Distinction between risks and threats. So we were talking about the distinction between risks and threats. Basically, we said that in terms of risk, it's unintentional harm that exists within primarily the infrastructure, what have you. Threats are intended harm, external harm. Obviously, intelligence community has to defend against both. Primarily, though, threats are of sort of, I wouldn't say greater importance, because they share a relatively equal amount of importance. But the main distinction, and I don't want to sort of overthink it, is one of intent. Risks, there is no intent. There's sort of a structural inherency of harm. The potential for harm inheres within the structure of X, whatever X might be. With respect to threats, threat is intended harm. The individual or the group, the organization intends to do harm for whatever purposes, and I sort of fleshed that out over, I think the last lecture wasn't quite 2 hours, like an hour and 45, hour and a half. So over the last hour and a half, I sort of went through that analysis. So we're picking up with that on bullet point number 3, top of page 10 in my notes. Alright, so number 3. With the attempt to develop intelligence theory proper, so this is important, right? In conceptualizing the development of intelligence theory proper, the theoretical foundation must acknowledge the threat. Like, you have to acknowledge the role of the threat, right? So theory must acknowledge the role of... Theory has to acknowledge the role of threat. It begins with acknowledging that terrorism is real, right? It begins with the acknowledgement that terrorism is real. Unlike much of the YouTube entertainment, which denies that terrorism is a fact, it would be profoundly disingenuous to construct a theory of intelligence based on evidence and fact, only to deny the evidence and fact. What do I mean by this? I recognize sort of the function of this lecture series. I mean, I have my own particular function, which everybody's incredibly interested in to see what the motivation and the meaning of the lecture series is. The idea is, on one level, I'm going to use this to build really insane systems. If you use it or not, that's on you. You know, this is a free world. You can log on and watch or not. Not only am I doing the research and the reading and compiling the notes and shooting the video, but after I do all of that, I'm going to go back and watch myself. Right? So I'm going to use this. But the idea is, there is a lot of competition, quote unquote, out there. So you go into YouTube, you type in 9/11, and then you watch the conspiracy theory videos on 9/11, and there's a billion of them. And you watch the theories that say, you know, terrorism isn't real, terrorism is all a hoax, and there is really no terror. Okay, fine. I'm not going to say that those arguments don't have some validity to them. I mean, and I'm an academic. There is some validity to these arguments. Conspiracy theories are themselves rooted in some truth. I'm an academic, though, right? I'm not an entertainer. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm also not here to entertain things that can't be proven, right? So my role in this is to make the assumption, based on evidence, that terrorism is real. That this isn't some conspiratorial new world order where, you know, a handful of people in the world are, you know, destroying stuff and blaming it on invisible people. Right? I can't take that approach. Does that approach exist? There's copious amounts of stuff out there that facilitates and feeds into the conspiratorial belief system that says all of this is all fake. And I'm not attempting in any sense to delegitimize people's beliefs. If you want to believe that that stuff's true, that's cool. You know, I'm not here to... That's another thing, too, that I don't entertain. I don't entertain sort of this petty back and forth of who's right, and I'm not going to argue with you. You know, if you want to believe that, believe that. The point is, I am doing this lecture series, and if you're sticking around to hear me talk at this point, you're 7.5 hours in, you're pretty serious about national security, right? No one's going to sit here and watch unless you happened upon this part of this video sort of serendipitously. But if you've watched 7.5 hours to get to this point, you're pretty serious about national security. In terms of national security, then, you have to recognize that we have to assume that this external threat is real in terms of 21st century, and that threat is manifesting and has manifested itself as decentralized terrorist communities, right? Individuated communities that are decentralized with varying goals, but that's what you have to, that's going to be part of the foundation with which we build our system in defense of, right? So we have to try and defend ourselves from, whatever state we might be, not just the United States, but whatever state we might be globally, have to defend ourselves from a decentralized force. Now, if you look at the United States as the terrorist regime, and you, in your country, perceive the United States as the external threat, and this is the theory you're going to be writing, well, obviously it's not decentralized, it's very centralized, right? So in that regard, there might be some distinctions. I am, as an American writing intelligence theory in the United States of America, am going to perceive the external threat as being decentralized. You, may perceive it as decentralized or centralized. It may be the US, it may not be. But the idea is you have to make a determination wherever